Sometimes you just fancy a nice cold can of Coke Zero, and I know that there are some geniuses on the internet that go, just drink water. But what if you don't fancy water and you want something cold and fizzy to quench that thirst that you had, so you find a can of Coke Zero? If you think Diet Coke's better than Coke Zero, you should leave the video now, just about when you're about to take a sip. What's that? It's your annoying auntie who thinks the world's flat, the conspiracy theorist always popping up at every single family meal. You're like, shut up. But you don't quite have the confidence you need to refute your mad auntie as to why Coke Zero is completely fine, when she seems to think you'd be better off having the sugary alternative versus a Coke Zero. So in this video, I'm going to give you all the evidence you need to shut her up next time she pipes up when you want a can of Coke Zero. So let's get into it. Look at that, techers, look at that. So one of the main reasons people lose their shit about this stuff is because of the word carcinogen. And what carcinogen mean is something like a substance that could potentially lead and give us cancer. So group 3, we've got things like magnetic fields, we've got coffee, we've even got fluorescent lights. And for all of those things, there's inadequate evidence to say that it's carcinogenic. Then moving up the realm of carcinogenic, we've got group 2A and 2B. The easiest way to determine the difference between these two is it's possible, but there's no significant evidence. Now the classification between 2B and 2A, in 2A, there might be some animal studies. And in 2B, there's not really any animal studies. Now, straight away those boffins that are coming out going, oh, but have you seen this study? It's in rats, rodents. So I have a question for you. Are you a rat? If yes, maybe worry about aspartame. If not, shut the fuck up. We need 100 grams of beef. It's harder than I thought it would be. And in 2B, we've got things like pickled vegetables and aloe vera extract. No one's ever stopping you with a pickled vegetable going, oh, it's carcinogenic. You'll get cancer. And in 2A, there's exposures from chemicals in hairdressing, and there's things like red meat. Let's go on a quick tangent with the red meat thing. Come with me. There are a lot of vegans on the internet that say that red meat gives you cancer. Long story short, it doesn't. But when you look at massive populations of people, you could say that people that eat a lot of red meat are more likely to get cancer. But that is correlation, not causation. Because what I want you to think about is this. People that live healthy diets actually eat a more varied diet of more leaner meats, white meats like fish, poultry, turkey, whatever. And people that have a rubbish diet of burgers, bacon, kebabs, takeaways. So actually, when we extrapolate, good word, the data, we could have a stronger argument that processed meats are correlated with more likeliness chances of getting cancer, whereas red meat in a whole, not really that much evidence. But it's not the meat that's giving the person cancer, it's just when looking at those massive populations of people, the people that are not health seeking, that don't give a shit about bedtimes, vegetables, sleep, the people that vape and drink every night, they eat more processed meat. It's not the meat giving them cancer, it's them giving them cancer because they're not health seeking populations. Picture the most unhealthy person you can in your mind, they eat a lot of processed meat. Have you seen Talladega Nights? Do you ever think you sound like Jean Girard? I have come to defeat you. Shall I come back? So the reason that so many people on the internet are losing their shit about aspartame is it was given the classification of 2B in the carcinogenic list. And best we don't leave out group 1. But do you know what also resides within group 2B as being a carcinogen? Mobile phones. So that auntie is pissing you off at the table. You can go, yeah, well, if you care that much about your health, why are you using a smartphone? And a quick side tangent would be as well, if people are drinking Coke Zero instead of traditional Coke, and that could help create a calorie deficit through reducing the amount of calories coming in that could help them with obesity, surely that would be the better of two evils when we know that obesity is a massive predictor in not only developing cancer, but other terminal conditions, stroke, heart attack, cardiovascular disease, and even chances of hospitalization with COVID. Oh, fat shaming, shut up. Studies show that up to 50 milligrams per kilogram of aspartame is completely safe. So what does that look like in the real world context? Occupational hazard. So if studies have found that consuming up to 50 milligrams of aspartame per kilogram is a safe amount, how much does that mean in Coke Zero? So if we take 50 milligrams times 96, which is my body weight, that works out to 4,800 milligrams of aspartame a day that I could have being a safe amount. Now, if there's 87 milligrams in each can of Coke Zero, how many cans does that equate to per day within the safe range? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the safe amount of aspartame in Coke Zero that you could have a day, and all of those. 55 cans a day within the safe range of aspartame a day. Now, if you're consuming this many cans, one, you and your dentist are going to be on pretty good terms, and two, you probably have bigger concerns at play here than the sweetener involved in this. I'd go as safe to say that you're probably mental. And the studies on aspartame have actually got something called a factor 100 safety margin, which means they've actually lowballed the amount that you could consume in a day and set that as a safe marker. You could actually have 10 times this amount and it would still be within the safe range. There are people much smarter than me in the industry who have looked at a lot more data than I've looked at, and they've said you could actually have up to 1,000 cans of diet soda a day and still be within the realms of what's considered safe. But I know what you're thinking. You've chemically produced something in the lab that you can put in a beverage to make it taste sweet without having to put sugar in it. Surely the absorption into the human body of aspartame is only going to cause havoc and wreck our guts and our systems, and breaking it down is going to absolutely ruin us and be unhealthy for all of our organs. So let's look into the science of that too. And there's actually something called a dose response. When we look at all the things that were on the board before, the higher the dose of that carcinogen, the worse the outcome would be. The more obese you were, the more likely you get cancer. The more you smoke, the more likely you are to get lung cancer. The more you drink, you get it. The higher the dose of the carcinogen, the worse your situation would be. Weirdly, in the studies that we have about aspartame, people that consume more of it actually were at a decreased risk of developing cancer. So as far as a dose response, we're still not really in the realms of seeing it as a dangerous thing, even consuming that many cans a day. So when 1 can of diet soda or Coke Zero enters the human body, it is broken down 10% into methanol, 40% into aspartic acid, and 50% into phenylalanine. So what does that mean? Well, although all these compounds can seem scary, 1 glass of tomato juice contains 6 times as much methanol as a can of diet soda. And 1 egg contains 34 times as much aspartic acid as a can of Coke Zero. And 100 grams of beef contains between 16 and 32 times as much phenylalanine as a can of diet soda. So when you look at what this is broken down to in the human body, we can't really build a strong argument that it's something we should be worried about. At the end of the day, life is about making the best choices possible, not the best choices. Although we could argue that a glass of water is better for you than a can of Coke Zero, if you feel like a can of Coke Zero, you should have one. Similarly to It's Obvious, we could say, never drink alcohol. You could live the healthiest life possible. But if you fancy a beer, nothing is going to quench your thirst for a beer like a beer. But we make the best choices possible. Maybe just have 5 pints instead of 15. But everything in moderation. Remember, when looking at things that are poisonous, it's often in the dose. You could drink too much water and poison yourself. So stop listening to your annoying auntie and instead think about your cousin, Fat Bob. He's a big boy. Big Bob, he needs some interventions he can bring into his life to make him healthier, because we all know he's a walking heart attack. And saying to him, hey Bob, instead of you having normal sugar-filled beverages of Coke, just have some Coke Zero. We could see a reduction of several hundred calories a day, and that compounded over a long period of time means that you could put yourself in a calorie deficit without even having to exercise more. Then over time, he's starting to feel better. The Coke Zero is starting to create a deficit for him. He might feel more inclined to get a gym membership, take more bloody steps in a day, and make more health-seeking behaviors. This is one of the easiest means that we can use to get people to reduce their calorie intakes without flipping their lives upside down. And when we know that long-term fat loss is mostly governed by sustainability and adherability, the evidence points us in one direction. Coke Zero is completely fine. There are way worse things in your life you should be worried about than a can of flipping Coke Zero.